For more than 1,000 years, the burial place of Genghis Khan stood as one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in all of history. And that was entirely by design. It was concealed with purpose. Rivers were rerouted, forests were grown over the site, and those who laid him to rest were never seen or heard from again. Even the location passed down through legend turned out to be a deliberately constructed deception. Historians investigated. Explorers came up empty. Nobody was ever supposed to find it. But now, the unthinkable has occurred. The tomb has finally been unsealed, and what was found within didn't merely rewrite the historical record. It left the entire world speechless. Rising from the wind-swept grasslands of Mongolia came one of the most fearsome rulers the world has ever known. Genghis Khan. Called Temujin before his ascent to power, his formative years were shaped by exile, treachery, and raw survival. Yet those trials forged an unyielding warrior of extraordinary determination. By the opening decades of the 13th century, Genghis Khan had brought the divided Mongol clans together beneath a single banner. Central to Genghis Khan's dominance was his groundbreaking approach to military organization. He cast aside the old tribal loyalty structures and built his armies around the decimal system, groupings of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 soldiers, known respectively as Arban, Jaghun, Mingan, and Tumen. Every unit was commanded by someone selected on merit alone, never on the basis of family lineage. This method bred fierce loyalty, tight coordination, and deadly efficiency. His fighters, mostly horseback archers, had been trained since boyhood. Their battlefield tactics were unlike anything previously witnessed. Blazing cavalry charges, deliberate false retreats designed to draw enemies into ambushes, and calculated psychological warfare that caused entire cities to lay down arms without a single blow. Between 1207 and 1225, Genghis Khan waged campaigns that brought entire kingdoms to their knees. He swept through western Xia and Jin China, turning great cities like Zhongdu into rubble. Yet it was the Khwarezmian Empire that bore the full weight of his fury. When the Shah had Genghis's trade envoys executed, the Khan answered with a devastating and near-apocalyptic campaign. Cities such as Samarkand and Bukhara were surrounded and destroyed. Very few survived. His rage was calculated, and terror was wielded as a weapon. Whole regions yielded at merely hearing the rumble of his approaching horsemen, dreading the fate suffered by those who had dared to resist. Yet conquest was not the only mark of this era of power. Genghis Khan was equally a gifted statesman. His written legal code, the Yasa, maintained discipline and ensured fairness across his expanding empire. It offered protection to diplomats and merchants alike, and even guaranteed religious freedom, a remarkably progressive position for that period. He drew administrators and learned men from the lands he conquered, among them Muslims, Chinese, and Persians. These individuals helped sustain a vast empire that operated through merit-driven governance, protected trade corridors, and the celebrated YAM, a postal relay network that linked the empire from the Pacific coast to the shores of the Caspian Sea. The outcome was Pax Mongolica, an uncommon era of stability across enormous stretches of Eurasia that nurtured trade, innovation, and the exchange of cultures. Commerce along the Silk Road flourished as never before. Caravan routes once terrorized by bandits now operated safely under Mongol oversight. Ideas, faiths, and inventions crossed borders with a freedom that had never existed before. Eventually, his death brought that era of power to a close. But in doing so, it gave birth to a far greater mystery that nobody could have anticipated. Let's get into it. Genghis Khan, the masterful military strategist and founder of the largest unbroken land empire in recorded history, drew his final breath during an active military campaign against the Western Xia dynasty in what is today northwestern China. The precise date of his passing remains a matter of debate, with certain sources pointing to August the 18th, while others argue for August the 25th. That uncertainty alone only adds further layers to the mystery surrounding the final chapter of his extraordinary life. Genghis Khan was a conqueror whose very name sent terror rippling from the Mongolian steppes all the way to the gates of Eastern Europe. And yet, for all the enormity of his legacy, the true circumstances of how he died have never been fully explained. Over the centuries, numerous accounts have surfaced, each pointing to a different cause of death, yet none offering conclusive evidence. One version holds that he fell to sickness, perhaps malaria, typhus, or even the plague, while commanding his forces under brutal conditions. Others argue he was fatally struck by an enemy arrow. Yet another account describes him being thrown from his horse on a hunt, sustaining deadly internal injuries. Some stories even attribute his death to a lightning bolt, lending the narrative a mystical, almost godlike quality. What remains certain, though, is that news of his passing was not disclosed to his army or the outside world right away. The Mongol leadership went to remarkable lengths to keep his death a closely held secret. They worried that revealing it mid-campaign could crush their soldiers' morale or give their enemies renewed courage. To preserve stability and authority, those closest to Genghis Khan set in motion a careful and deliberate plan to conceal what had happened. Following his death, his body was quietly moved back toward the Mongolian heartland for burial. The entire journey took place under a shroud of complete secrecy. The precise location of his final resting place has never been established, and that is largely due to the extreme measures taken to keep it concealed. Perhaps the most disturbing element of the whole operation was the reported killing of everyone involved in the funeral procession. According to legend, each person who took part in transporting and burying the Great Khan was put to death so that no one could ever disclose the tomb's location. And as though that were not sufficient, additional steps were taken to wipe away any trace of the burial. The ground where he was laid is said to have been stamped over by thousands of horses to disguise any sign of disruption in the earth. With the passage of time, nature grew back over the land, further burying whatever hints may have remained. These remarkable precautions not only kept the tomb secret, but also gave rise to one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in human history. Historians, archaeologists, and bold adventurers have spent centuries attempting to uncover the truth about where Genghis Khan was laid to rest. Ancient manuscripts, modern satellite imaging, the search has pulled in specialists from across the globe. Yet for all the technological progress and the many expeditions launched, nobody has confirmed the precise burial site to this day. The mystery runs even deeper. There are still more astonishing details to share about the guarding rituals that kept his tomb hidden across the centuries, legends and rituals shielding the grave. When Genghis Khan died, the Mongols did not simply put their leader in the ground. They buried a legend beneath layers of secrecy, ceremony, and sacred safeguarding that have endured for nearly 800 years. The drive to protect his final resting place was never just about concealing a grave. It was about honoring the spiritual legacy of a man seen not only as a great conqueror, but as a deeply sacred ancestral figure of divine importance. Among the most puzzling elements tied to Genghis Khan's burial is the territory referred to as the Great Taboo, or Ik Korig. This is a closely protected zone situated around Burkhan Khaldun, a revered mountain in northeastern Mongolia. Covering roughly 240 square kilometers, this region was set aside exclusively for the royal family. Outsiders were strictly forbidden from entering. It was watched over by an elite group of warriors called the Darkhad, a hereditary order of guardians charged with keeping the area safe. These sentinels approached the land with profound respect, preserving its sacred nature and ensuring that no one could enter or interfere with the terrain. For generations, the Darkhad observed their rituals and left the land undisturbed, making certain that the Khan's possible resting place stayed hidden and untouched. Local folklore deepens the mystery even further. Legends tell that the Mongols redirected rivers to run directly over the burial site. All of this was done to wipe out every last trace of where the tomb was hidden. Redirecting water through such a remote and difficult terrain would have demanded enormous labor, but for the Mongols, no effort was considered too great when it came to paying tribute to their great Khan. Certain accounts also describe how thousands of trees were planted throughout the surrounding area to disguise the landscape and give it the appearance of untouched natural wilderness. Over many generations, those trees grew and blended into their surroundings, making the man-made alterations nearly impossible to distinguish from nature itself. The permafrost conditions present in that region are also thought to have contributed to the preservation of the burial site, keeping it locked beneath frozen earth and soil, which further prevented any interference. Another dimension to this mystery takes us far from Mongolia to Ordos in Inner Mongolia, a territory that today falls within China. There, an enormous mausoleum was constructed in tribute to Genghis Khan. It boasts striking architecture and draws tens of thousands of visitors annually. Yet for all its grandeur, this structure holds no actual remains. It is broadly understood that the coffin placed within it is empty. The Ordo's mausoleum serves as a symbolic place of remembrance rather than a true burial site. This fact has only deepened the curiosity and speculation surrounding the location of the real grave and why such secrecy has endured across so many centuries. The rituals and the silence surrounding Genghis Khan's tomb have transformed it into one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in all of recorded history, and reverence for those traditions remains alive to this day. This puzzle has long captivated archaeologists and historians alike, sparking relentless curiosity. Driven by determination to find answers, many have devoted themselves to uncovering this ancient secret. And now, let's talk about the efforts that have been made to do exactly that. Modern archaeological endeavors. Despite centuries of secrecy and myth, modern technology has introduced powerful new tools that have breathed fresh life into the search. Through satellite imagery and ground-based detection methods, archaeologists and explorers have undertaken numerous missions in pursuit of one of the world's most enduring historical riddles. Among the most significant of these efforts was an initiative led by National Geographic explorer Albert Lin Yu Min. Drawing on a combination of satellite imaging, magnetometry, and ground-penetrating radar, Lin directed his search toward the Kyanty Mountains in northeastern Mongolia. This area carries deep significance in Mongolian history and is widely regarded as one of the most likely regions where Genghis Khan may have been laid to rest. What distinguished Lin's approach was how it brought together local Mongolian volunteers alongside cutting-edge imaging technologies. The team was deliberate in avoiding any direct disturbance to the land, out of respect for Mongolian cultural values and spiritual traditions. By carefully studying satellite photographs and applying non-invasive methods to detect underground irregularities, the project uncovered several areas of strong interest. Although no confirmed tomb was identified, the expedition established a new benchmark for conducting archaeological research in a way that was both scientifically rigorous and culturally respectful. Prior to Lin's efforts, another major expedition had taken place several decades before. Between 1989 and 1992, a collaborative team of Japanese and Mongolian archaeologists carried out what became known as the Three Rivers Expedition. This group conducted wide-ranging surveys of land near the Onon, Kurlan, and Tul rivers, a region regarded as historically significant, since many high-ranking Mongols were believed to have lived and died in that area. Over the course of their multi-year investigation, the team identified approximately 1,380 possible graves belonging to members of the Mongol aristocracy. Their findings greatly advanced the broader understanding of Mongol burial practices and confirmed that elite burial grounds were clustered within particular geographic areas. Yet even with this considerable progress, the actual resting place of Genghis Khan himself continued to remain out of reach. The work of this team made it painfully clear how challenging it would be to pinpoint a single tomb among so many comparable sites, particularly one that had been deliberately concealed. Perhaps the most tenacious figure in this pursuit was an American lawyer-turned-adventurer by the name of Maury Kravitz. For more than 40 years, he dedicated his entire life to uncovering Genghis Khan's burial place. Kravitz carried out more than a dozen expeditions across Mongolia and built lasting connections with local communities and scholars. Rather than leaning heavily on technology the way others might have, he blended historical writings with personal instinct and hands-on fieldwork. His belief was that the tomb had been concealed within a landscape disguised by natural geography and ancient Mongol ceremonial traditions. Yet despite his burning passion and unwavering commitment, Kravitz never succeeded in locating it. His journeys, however, gave rise to tales of supernatural interference and strange happenings that lent a mystical quality to an already deeply mysterious search. Members of his team and local people alike reportedly experienced odd dreams, sudden, unexplained illnesses, and baffling mechanical breakdowns. These accounts strengthened a growing belief that the tomb was shielded not merely by secrecy, but by some kind of spiritual force that actively resisted any attempt at intrusion. But just as everyone felt they were edging closer, the mystery took another sharp turn, and startling new evidence suggested the true location of the tomb was nowhere anyone had been searching all along. Alan Nichols and the riddle of Mountain Axe. Among the many adventurers who have chased the mystery of Genghis Khan's burial site, one particular name stands apart for introducing a daring and deeply controversial theory. Alan Nichols, an American explorer and former president of the Explorers Club, put forward a hypothesis that shook centuries of prevailing belief. While the majority of researchers had concentrated their attention near Burkhan Khaldun, the sacred mountain long associated with Genghis Khan's death and presumed burial site, Nichols argued that the actual tomb might lie somewhere completely different. He suggested the Khan's final resting place could be hidden within a remote and unmapped peak he referred to simply as Mountain X. Nichols did not arrive at this conclusion hastily. His theory was built upon years of dedicated research, careful study of historical documents, and the piecing together of geographical clues. What made his idea so striking was the dramatic shift in focus, moving away from northeastern Mongolia toward a region situated much closer to the Yellow River in Inner Mongolia. This territory, steeped in history and filled with vast stretches of largely unexplored land, became the central focus of one of his most secretive expeditions. To pursue this theory, Nichols put together a small, tight-knit team and brought in an array of modern instruments, among them ground-penetrating radar and magnetometers. These devices are built to detect irregularities beneath the ground, uncovering potential man-made structures or burial chambers, while leaving the surface undisturbed. The results proved intriguing. In multiple locations within the search area, the equipment registered unusual patterns below the surface that hinted at hidden chambers or buried artifacts. These findings were never released for full public review, which only deepened the sense of mystery surrounding his work. What made Nichols's expedition even more compelling was the extraordinary degree of secrecy that surrounded it. Working in a politically delicate region near the Yellow River required carefully managing complex relationships with local officials and governing authorities. The area contained military zones, restricted entry points, and multiple layers of bureaucratic oversight. Nichols understood the geopolitical weight of what he was doing and made certain his activities drew as little attention as possible. There were no large groups, no public statements, and absolutely no media presence. Every step was calculated to avoid inviting unwanted scrutiny. This culture of secrecy extended well beyond political concerns. Even among fellow archaeologists and explorers, Nichols was widely known for keeping the specifics of his discoveries tightly guarded. Some critics raised concerns about the absence of transparency, while others appreciated his careful approach, considering the cultural and diplomatic sensitivities tied to the resting place of a national hero. Nichols felt that announcing findings too early could stir unrest or even ignite disputes among nations with historical connections to the legacy of Genghis Khan. Then came the most anticipated and staggering moment of the entire dig, a turning point that brought to light astonishing discoveries nobody could have foreseen. The opening of a 1,000-year secret. After countless generations of speculation and many decades of scientific effort, the long-concealed tomb thought to belong to Genghis Khan was at last brought to light. This moment, widely regarded as the most significant archaeological event of the modern age, marked the potential resolution of one of the greatest mysteries in all of human history. The excavation did not unfold in a single night. It was the product of careful coordination and collaboration among multiple international bodies and the Mongolian government. Given the enormous cultural and historical weight of the site, opening the tomb required formal consent from Mongolia, supervision by UNESCO, and monitoring by United Nations representatives to guarantee that every action upheld global heritage standards and ethical research principles. Each step toward the opening was shaped by precision and caution. Research teams and government officials agreed on clear protocols to ensure no disrespect was shown toward Mongolian traditions. Beyond the Mongolian Cultural Ministry, specialists in history, anthropology, and religious studies were brought in for consultation. The aim was to strike a balance between scientific inquiry and cultural respect. Only after a thorough review did the operation move forward. A small team, armed with advanced equipment, entered the site under the watchful eyes of international observers and local community leaders. Inside, the researchers came upon a large and elaborately built burial chamber. Its architecture reflected influences from the many regions that fell within the reach of the Mongol Empire. Stone slabs engraved with symbols enclosed the tomb on all sides. Within the chamber rested a collection of funerary objects, each one offering a window into the life and legacy of whoever lay buried there. Among them were finely crafted weapons, ceremonial armor, ancient scrolls, and vessels containing preserved food offerings. The condition of these items suggested they had been sealed away with extraordinary care. Perhaps the most remarkable find was the discovery of human remains. The skeletal structure appeared consistent with what specialists would expect from a male warrior leader of the early 13th century. The bones were remarkably well preserved, likely due to the cool underground environment and the airtight construction of the chamber. Alongside the remains were fragments of fine textiles, some still displaying patterns that had not dimmed over the centuries. These materials were extracted with great delicacy and placed into protective containers for further examination. Once the objects and remains had been recovered, a new stage of investigation got underway. Scientists applied radiocarbon dating to establish the age of the artifacts and skeletal material. The findings aligned with the estimated year of Genghis Khan's death in 1227, lending strong weight to the theory that this was truly his burial place. Ancient DNA analysis was also carried out on the bones. Although researchers had no confirmed sample from Genghis Khan to compare against, they identified genetic markers connecting the individual to Central Asian populations, consistent with historical records of Mongol ancestry. The textiles were subjected to a separate round of study. Fiber analysis revealed the use of silk and wool, alongside techniques characteristic of both Mongolian and Chinese craftsmanship. This merging of cultural influences further strengthened the case that the occupant of the tomb was a figure who brought together vastly different regions under a single identity. The dig didn't just bring physical objects to the surface. It cracked open a window into a world long since forgotten. Every single artifact carried its own story. What lay inside the tomb revealed not just immense wealth and authority, but also deep spiritual conviction and remarkable cultural sophistication. This was no mere burial site. It was a message sealed in time, waiting to be read. While certain scholars continue to debate the identity of the remains, the body of evidence gathered during this landmark excavation makes a compelling case that the resting place of Genghis Khan has at last been located. But this was far more than a routine dig, and for the people of Mongolia, its significance ran much deeper than history. This wasn't simply the unearthing of the past. It felt like the spirit of their greatest ancestor stirring back to life. The news of the tomb believed to belong to Genghis Khan sent ripples of emotion and heated debate across Mongolia and throughout the wider world. For Mongolian people, this went well beyond an archaeological find. It was a profoundly spiritual and cultural moment that cut right to the core of their national identity. The response was a complex blend of pride, intense curiosity, and genuine unease. Many Mongolians saw the discovery as both a historic triumph and a possible disturbance of something deeply sacred. In traditional Mongolian belief, Genghis Khan occupies far more than a historical role. He is honored almost as a godlike forefather. His legacy is embedded throughout the nation, from classroom teachings to state celebrations. The revelation that his tomb may have been found inspired a sense of wonder, but also dread. Quiet talk spread through certain Mongolian communities about an ancient curse that could bring catastrophe. These fears drew from old legends cautioning that terrible misfortune would befall anyone who dared to disturb the Khan's final resting place. Rumors moved fast. Some feared that opening the tomb could trigger political chaos, devastating natural events, or an upset in the spiritual order. Others felt the act defied the will of the ancestors, who had deliberately kept the tomb concealed across the centuries. Beyond spiritual anxiety, the discovery stirred sensitive questions around national identity. In Mongolia, Genghis Khan stands as an emblem of unity, dignity, and cultural power. His likeness graces banknotes, towering statues, and government buildings alike. The long concealment of his tomb had become part of a shared national story, one that honored tradition and the invisible guardianship of heritage. Now, with international eyes fixed on the site, many Mongolians felt the narrative was slipping from their grasp. Public conversation erupted over who held the right to study the tomb, who should take responsibility for the artifacts, and whether any of the findings ought to be shared with the outside world at all. The political dimension brought yet another layer of complexity. In Inner Mongolia, a region of China home to a significant ethnic Mongol population, the discovery stirred cultural pride while simultaneously heightening tensions. Ethnic Mongols there have long fought to protect their language and way of life under Chinese governance. The possibility that Genghis Khan's burial site might rest near or within their territory became a charge point of cultural and political significance. Russia, too, with its deep historical ties to the Mongol Empire and its continuing influence across Central Asia, took notice of the discovery, adding fuel to the regional contest over who truly inherits the legacy of the Great Khan. In the West, meanwhile, academic communities greeted the news with considerable excitement. Historians and archaeologists hailed the potential confirmation of one of the most consequential burial sites ever known to human history. Genghis Khan has long been studied for his groundbreaking military tactics, his systems of governance, and the enormous empire he forged. The prospect of finally establishing a physical connection to such a monumental figure promised fresh understanding of that era. Universities, museums, and research institutions across the Western world began exploring the possibility of collaborative projects, DNA analysis, and future investigations built upon what had already been uncovered. Yet even that enthusiasm had to be kept in check, as researchers were reminded of the deep cultural sensitivities tied to the tomb. The find created a striking tension between scientific curiosity and sacred reverence. For Mongolia, it was a moment of genuine reflection. Was this the fulfillment of a long-held historical dream, or an intrusion upon hallowed ground? For the wider world, it served as a powerful reminder that the past is not simply a collection of stories and objects. It lives on in the identities, beliefs, and emotions of people who still carry its legacy. This was no ordinary discovery. It overturned much of what we believed we understood about history, and it is already shaping the future in ways nobody could have anticipated. What does this discovery mean going forward? The uncovering of what is widely believed to be the tomb of Genghis Khan has left the entire world speechless. But beyond the initial wave of excitement, it has thrown open a floodgate of difficult questions about ethics, heritage, conservation, and the direction of historical research. As scientists study ancient remains and relics, a deeper challenge looms. How should the world approach a discovery that is simultaneously a historical treasure and a sacred site? Among the most urgent concerns is the ethical dilemma at the heart of it all. The site is far more than an archaeological marvel. It holds profound spiritual meaning for the Mongolian people. For centuries, the tomb remained untouched, shielded by tradition, secrecy, and legend. Many Mongolians regard the tomb as sacred and believe that disturbing it may bring spiritual consequences. Ancient stories warn of curses waiting to be unleashed, and some worry that opening the tomb has already unsettled a fragile spiritual equilibrium. For these people, this is not merely about uncovering the past. It is about honoring the very soul of their nation. The excavation of the site raises a fundamental question. Should the pursuit of knowledge justify the violation of sacred ground? This is precisely where the concept of heritage stewardship becomes central. The responsibility for what happens next rests not only with archaeologists, but also with the Mongolian government, spiritual leaders, and international cultural bodies such as UNESCO. Together, they must find a path that preserves the dignity of the site while still allowing meaningful research. Conversations have already begun regarding the possibility of reburial, a respectful act deeply aligned with Mongolian tradition. Others have proposed erecting a protective structure over the site, enabling future access without subjecting the tomb to deterioration or harm. Among the most culturally thoughtful proposals is the idea of allowing the Dark Had, the traditional guardians of royal burial sites, to continue fulfilling their role. These sacred protectors have handed down their rituals across many generations. Permitting them to maintain their practices at the tomb would restore a meaningful sense of cultural continuity. Certain conservationists also support carefully limited museum displays, where chosen artifacts could be presented with full context and proper reverence. Such exhibitions would center on education and respect rather than spectacle. Western voices have entered the conversation too. On his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, Joe Rogan addressed the discovery with a tone of wonder and genuine curiosity. He reflected on the sheer scale of the find, pointing out how it challenges long-standing assumptions and has the potential to rewrite portions of world history. Rogan praised the role of modern technology in unlocking ancient mysteries, but he also voiced concern about disturbing sites of deep spiritual importance. He debated whether the gains of such a discovery truly outweigh the risks of causing offense to cultural and spiritual traditions. Rogan and his guest stressed the importance of proceeding carefully, urging listeners to think about the broader consequences of revealing secrets that may have been buried for a reason. As those conversations continue to unfold, one thing stands firmly clear: any future research must move forward with exceptional care and sensitivity. This discovery lays the groundwork for major new developments in archaeology, particularly in the growing field of non-invasive technology. Technologies such as ground-penetrating radar, remote sensing, and high-resolution satellite imagery give researchers the ability to investigate other possible sites without ever breaking sacred ground. This method may well become the new standard, particularly in areas abundant with cultural heritage. Ancient DNA research is another field showing real promise. Scientists today possess the capability to draw genetic data from remains without causing damage to them. This could help verify the identity of whoever rests within the tomb and even map out their bloodline. Certain researchers remain hopeful that such findings could link modern Mongolians and other Central Asian communities to their ancestral origins. Even so, any such studies need to be conducted with full transparency and with the complete consent of the Mongolian people, who have every right to shape their own historical story. When all is said and done, this discovery reaches far beyond the past. It serves as a test for the present and a genuine challenge for the future. It calls on humanity to choose wisdom above curiosity and respect above conquest. The tomb of Genghis Khan may have been unsealed, but what humanity chooses to do from this point forward will determine how we ourselves are remembered. What do you think about this remarkable reopening of Genghis Khan's tomb and the astonishing things discovered inside? Share your thoughts down in the comments and be sure to tap the cards on screen for even more fascinating stories.